Hello, I'm Suzanne James. Welcome to Nightshift, the podcast where we talk all things voluntary assisted dying in Australia. We'll be joined today by New South Wales Greens Upper House MP Dr Amanda Cohn, who is also a Green spokesperson for health. We'll be speaking today about an awful bill that's been introduced in the Upper House by MLC Susan Carter, who is a Liberal. It is a bill that seeks to amend New South Wales' very hard-won voluntary assisted dying laws. For those of you who have been following, you will know that it was made legal in New South Wales in 2022 and is up for its standard 3-year legislative review next year. So to talk to us some more about where this awful bill came from, Dr Cohn joins us from Sydney now. Amanda, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
VAD became legal in New South Wales in 2022 and is up for its standard legislative review next year. Go Gentle Australia and the Older Persons Advocacy Network also recently released a report in September that found that 85% of residential aged care facilities neither supported nor provided any information about voluntary assisted dying to their residents, despite it being a legal end-of-life care option, the same as palliative care and everything else. Here in New South Wales, the legislation is due for its mandatory review next year. So why did Liberal MLC Susan Carter put this residential facilities bill up now? We'll get to what is in it shortly. But why would they raise it now? Are they trying to, for some reason, preempt the normal review process?
You're asking a very good question here about the timing, because these laws are so new in New South Wales. So as you said, the laws passed in 2022, and that was so hard fought by so many advocates. They only actually came into effect in November 2023. So it's very new for these laws in New South Wales. And what we've seen in other jurisdictions like Victoria is over time, once we see how these laws are working in practice, it's really important to have that review process with full consultation with all the relevant stakeholders to work out if any tweaks are required. And what we've now seen with this bill is it's very narrow in terms of the change that it makes, but it hasn't gone through that kind of process where you would actually involve all of the relevant people and all of the relevant stakeholders to have their say on it. So it's caught a lot of people by surprise who are expecting to be part of this statewide conversation through the proper process next month, that we're now all of a sudden debating this part of it. And I suppose there's a whole variety of different conspiracy theories about the timing in terms of the politics of it and what it means for the major parties. But it's difficult to justify knowing that there is this proper process coming literally in the coming months.
Now, this bill is known as the Voluntary Assisted Dying Residential Facilities Bill 2025. It is not part of the current VAD legislation. Now, this bill hinges on the premise that an institution, or in this case a business unit, can somehow conscientiously object to a resident using VAD, even though individuals within the aged care sector and their organisations are already protected by conscientious objection clauses for individuals. I'd also like to stress that allowing residents to access this legal health care in no way makes the facility in any way responsible for either its application or its administration. That is still done externally by the New South Wales Health VAD Navigator Services, regardless of the person's address. And we also saw on Monday, Amanda, that Go Gentle issued a press release noting that they received legal advice that this is actually unconstitutional and in direct contravention with the new Federal Aged Care Act. Have you also seen legal advice in relation to this, and what does that say?
I have seen this legal advice, and what it says is that the Commonwealth Aged Care Act and aged care rules guarantee the right of a person to have their needs, goals and preferences for end-of-life care be recognised and be addressed by aged care service providers, and that includes voluntary assisted dying. So, there is very senior legal advice that now says this bill is constitutionally invalid, which, really means we shouldn't be debating it seriously. But what I think the bill has fundamentally misunderstood here is that residential aged care facilities are someone's home. It's not just a business or an organisation. This is attempting to restrict someone's access to legal health care in their own home. And so this idea that it's just simply aligning the legislation so that residential aged care facilities are treating the same thing as hospitals, I think really underplays the seriousness of that proposal.
Well, we'll look now at what this bill actually says. It has two major things on which it hinges. It would allow them to forcibly block New South Wales Health approved VAD practitioners from attending approved VAD patients in their facilities at every stage, not just at the stage when the person chooses to pass away. What justification has Susan Carter given for this amendment?
So in the debate in Parliament, she actually used the word simply in talking about transferring someone to access voluntary assisted dying. And I think it's really important to understand what we're actually talking about in practice. We're talking about people who are terminally ill, who are frail, where you can't just hop in a car to go to an appointment, where a transfer might be painful, might actually be medically harmful. You know, we're talking about people getting collected in an ambulance. You know, I've heard from an individual who needs to be moved using a hoist system. So there's a real complexity and cruelty here. But also the voluntary assisted dying process isn't just one appointment. There's a really complex process people have to go through in terms of their assessment and their consent. This can be up to 7 different appointments, as well as the actual administration of voluntary assisted dying if people choose to go ahead with it. So this idea of just simply transferring people, I mean, we're talking about taking someone right at the end of their life out of their own home, either to die in hospital, which is something that they don't want, or in some cases actually outside of the town that they live in altogether. And there's at least 20 towns in New South Wales where there is only one residential aged care facility that's run by a faith-based provider. And this cruelty of taking someone away from their family and their community at the end of their life, I mean, it totally goes against the principles of what the voluntary assisted dying laws that came in 2022 sought to give people in terms of that autonomy and that dignity at the end of their lives.
My second point was going to be, which you just very eloquently covered, that they want this person to be transferred out for every single part of the process. Now, my late partner unfortunately suffered from muscular dystrophy and also had 2 bouts of cancer and required numerous hospital admissions, and he lived at home with me with the assistance of an aged care package. And I can tell you, if you think transferring anybody who has even the remotest mobility or severe illness is simple, then you clearly do not have a grasp of the issues. Would you say that's very much the case with the people supporting this bill?
I would agree with that. I think there really hasn't been proper consideration of what this means for people on the ground. I mean, we talked about some of the practicalities of what a transfer really means for people, but the other thing is that aged care is just not a choice for so many people. This idea that everybody who chooses to live in a faith-based aged care facility is part of that faith-based community is just not true. I mean, all of these towns where there's only one facility, we know that there are thousands of people admitted to hospitals across New South Wales who can't be discharged because they can't access an aged care bed. There's lots of people who end up in the only aged care facility that they can actually find to live in based on their care needs. So I think for anyone, for themselves or for a loved one who's gone through that process of finding aged care, this idea that there's a whole lot of choice involved is just really out of touch.
Well, I can vouch for that. We live in a regional area on your patch in the Riverina, and at the time we first obtained the aged care funding, there were only 2 aged care providers here, and they were both owned by the Catholic Church, and that is still very much the case in many regional areas. And often the only choice involves quite a lot of tech and their remote databases, and it's extremely difficult to manage. So what justifications are you hearing?
So the justifications that have been put forward are this idea of religious freedom for the organisation and for the staff. And I think it's important to recognise, as you've pointed out, the laws already provide conscientious objection for individuals. So for staff who work at an aged care facility, they can choose not to take part in voluntary assisted dying. But the law, as it currently stands, really importantly, doesn't stop a conscientious objector from blocking someone's access altogether in their own home. So this idea that people's religious beliefs or religious freedoms should actually extend to controlling other people's access is quite extraordinary and unsurprising from some of the members of Parliament who are supporting it. And I think there's also this argument that it's just, we're just simply aligning aged care with hospitals. We'll just simply transfer people. There's been this real underplaying of the significance of what is being proposed. The proponent of the bill has said that she's not trying to restrict access to voluntary assisted dying in New South Wales, but it's very clear that the result of this bill passing would be restricting access to a huge number of people. Yeah, so I mean, in New South Wales, voluntary assisted dying is legal and it's healthcare that's provided by New South Wales Health. So this idea that people can be blocked or restricted in their own home from accessing their own legal rights because of somebody else's religious beliefs is really quite extraordinary.
Residential aged care facilities, regardless of whether they are denominational or not, receive roughly $300 to $400 per day per resident in government funding, sometimes more for high needs residents, which obviously someone who was elderly and terminally ill will be. With numbers like that, it's difficult to think that institutions can even pretend that there is no vested financial factor behind a bill like this. Have you heard any facility or government funding issues been raised during the debate on this amendment bill, or do they seriously just want us all to believe it's about religion?
So far in the debate in Parliament, there haven't been any financial or resource-based arguments made. To be honest, I find them a little bit challenging, and they've been made in favour of voluntary assisted dying as well, where some people talk about the resource strain on public hospitals being an important reason for people to be able to access voluntary assisted dying in residential aged care. And I think it's much more important that this debate be focused on people's rights to bodily autonomy, to make choices about their end-of-life care with dignity. That's the spirit in which voluntary assisted dying was legalised in New South Wales, and that's what we need to protect by opposing this bill now.
And during all the initial debates, to which I had a front row seat, working with Dying with Dignity New South Wales and various other bodies at the time it was going through Parliament the last time, a previous effort having been defeated by just one vote. The church is good at sowing division on this issue, but I've been made aware by an organisation known as Christians Supporting Choice for Voluntary Assisted Dying, and it was also raised by The Guardian at the time, that the vast majority of Christians, including Catholics, actually support the individual's right to choose or not choose VAD, even if they don't believe in it for themselves and their families. Has your office been contacted by people concerned about this bill? What's the public level of interest and concern you're seeing, or are people broadly still unaware of the details and what it actually means in practical application?
My office has received thousands of emails about this bill. People living with terminal illness or chronic complex illness, or people who are living in residential aged care or who are caring for elderly relatives, are deeply concerned about what this bill means for their ability to make choices about end-of-life care. So I think for people who are interested in this issue, they are well aware that this is a terrifying bill that's proposing really significant reform. I think once people understand what it's proposing, they're understandably very upset about this, and it's probably had less public and media attention than you would expect, just because it's moved so quickly through the Parliament. It went really straight to debate shortly after being tabled, and we would normally expect to have far longer to consider a bill like this.
Minister Rose Jackson has said in Parliament on behalf of herself and New South Wales Health she'll be voting against it, and that's in accordance with their own advice from the New South Wales Health Department, which she also again highlighted in her own speech, highlighted the abject cruelty of its practical application. So what is your reading of the level of support this bill does or does not have in the upper house at this point, and how important is it for people to continue to contact their upper house MPs about this?
It's so important for people to continue to contact upper house MPs about this, and that's because this is a conscience vote for the Liberal Party and for the Labor Party. So it means that the numbers are a bit uncertain and difficult to gauge. There's obviously lots of conversations happening behind the scenes in the Parliament. Certainly for the Greens, this is a matter of health policy, not a matter of individual conscience. So all Greens will be voting against the bill as a matter of health policy. I think in particular, people who live in rural and regional communities, knowing the profound impact that this bill would have, that there's a risk that voluntary assisted dying might not be available in any in any residential aged care facility at all in the town. I mean, I would hope that that would be of interest to members of the National Party representing rural and regional communities. So we certainly need to hear from people who care about this issue. Debate could resume as early as Wednesday next week, but it's still not certain when the vote will happen.
Amanda Cohn, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for your interest in the issue. I really appreciate it.
My name's Suzanne James, and listening to Dr Amanda Cohn, the Greens spokesperson for New South Wales Health and MLC in the Upper House, talking about Susan Carter's bill to amend the VAD Act.